So, what do you think a tiny, self-sufficient village has in common with a global superpower? I mean, on the surface, they seem like they're from different planets, right? But believe it or not, they're both trying to solve the exact same fundamental puzzle. Today, we're going to dive into that puzzle and look at the four major ways societies have tried to answer three really simple but really important economic questions.
That's right. No matter where you look, ancient civilizations, modern megacities, it doesn't matter. Every single society is up against the same core problem. And this problem, it quietly shapes almost everything in our lives. We're talking about the price of gas, the kinds of jobs available where you live, even the future we can imagine for ourselves.
And that problem has a name: scarcity. It's really the heart of all economics. Think about it. We humans, we want a lot of stuff. In fact, our wants are pretty much unlimited. But we live in a world where resources, time, money, materials are limited. And that gap between what we want and what we have forces everybody, from individuals to entire nations, to make choices. Because let's face it, we just can't have it all.
And those choices, they really boil down to three basic questions that are all tied together. First, what should we produce? Are we going to make more cars or more hospitals? Second, how are we going to produce it? Are we using lots of human labor, or are we going to use robots and automation? And third, for whom are we making all this stuff? Does it all go to the wealthy, or do we try to spread it out more evenly? How a society decides to answer these three questions, well, that defines its entire economic system.
So let's look at how societies have tried to answer these questions. The first and oldest way is what we call a traditional economy. In this system, you don't look to a government plan or the stock market for answers. Nope. You look to the past. You rely on customs, beliefs, and traditions that have been around forever.
This system is all about stability. Your job, your economic role, it's basically passed down to your family. You do what your parents and their parents did. It's usually a subsistence economy, which just means you make enough to get by and not much more. Now, this creates a lot of consistency, for sure, but our source material points out that it also really discourages innovation and change. Social and religious rules are way more important than economic growth.
Okay, so our second answer is a complete 180 from tradition. This is capitalism, or a market economy. Here, the power to answer those three big questions shifts dramatically, away from the past and into the hands of individuals and the open market.
And you can see the core ideas right here. In a capitalist system, you can own your own stuff, private property is key. The main driver for everything is the search for profit. Both consumers and producers get freedom of choice, and the whole thing is guided by invisible market forces like supply and demand. The government's role, it's supposed to be minimal. It's a philosophy called laissez-faire, which is just French for let it be. Basically, hands off.
So, what are the upsides of this? Well, that drive for profit and all that competition can lead to some incredible innovation and productivity. The system is also super flexible. It automatically adjusts to things like shortages or surpluses through price changes. And for you and me, the consumers, all that competition usually means better products at lower prices.
But, and this is a big but, there are some major trade-offs. Capitalism can create huge gaps between the rich and the poor. It can also lead to monopolies where one company takes over and can charge whatever it wants, which is bad for consumers. And, as our source points out, since the focus is always on profit, things society needs but that aren't very profitable, they can get ignored. It can even lead to the exploitation of workers.
This brings us to our third answer, which is pretty much the philosophical opposite of capitalism. We're talking about a socialist or command economy. Here, the power to answer those three big questions doesn't rest with the individual at all. It rests with the state.
And this slide right here shows you the single most important difference. In capitalism, the resources, the factories, the land, the tools, they're owned by private individuals. In socialism, those same things are owned by the state, supposedly for the benefit of everyone. And that one fundamental difference, it changes absolutely everything about how the economy works.
You can see how that one difference in ownership has a huge ripple effect. Where capitalism's motive is profit, socialism's motive is social welfare. Instead of market forces, you have a central plan from the government guiding everything. And private property, which is unlimited in capitalism, here it's severely restricted.
So, what's the argument for a system like this? Well, the goal is to use resources efficiently to make things that are socially useful, not just things that are profitable. It tries to create economic stability, getting rid of the wild booms and busts of a market system.
The #1 priority is social welfare, making sure everyone's basic needs are met, and preventing that extreme inequality and those private monopolies that can pop up in capitalism. On the flip side, the drawbacks are pretty serious. When the state runs everything, it can create a massive, slow, and really inefficient bureaucracy. It also restricts individual freedom, telling people where they have to work and limiting what they can buy. And without the fire of competition, there's often less reason to innovate or, as the source material notes, even to work hard. Okay, so we've got these two systems with some really clear pros and cons. And that leads us, naturally, to the fourth and by far the most common answer you'll see in the world today, the mixed economy. It's basically an attempt to create a practical blend of the two. In the real world, a mixed economy isn't just one thing. It combines a private sector, which runs on capitalist ideas like profit and competition, with a public sector that focuses on socialist goals like providing for the public good with things like government services.
The whole goal is summed up perfectly by our source material here, the consolidation of merits of capitalism and socialism. In other words, you're trying to get the best of both worlds. You want the innovative engine of the market, but you also want the state's focus on fairness and social well-being.
And the strengths of this blended approach are pretty clear. It aims for the efficiency you get from capitalism, but it lets the government step in to regulate markets to protect people, to stop monopolies or prevent pollution. It keeps the profit motive, which drives growth, but it also provides social safety nets like public education, healthcare, and unemployment benefits.
But, trying to mash two opposing ideas together, it isn't always easy. Probably the biggest challenge is just poor coordination between the public and private parts of the economy. The public sector can get bogged down by red tape and inefficiency, while the private sector might push back against government rules. And that friction can sometimes lead to economic hiccups and instability.
So at the end of the day, what does this all tell us? It tells us that there's no perfect system. There's no silver bullet. Each one of these, traditional, capitalist, socialist, and mixed, is just a different set of trade-offs. They're all just different strategies that a society has chosen to answer those three basic questions: what to produce, how to produce it, and for whom, in a world where you can't have everything. And this brings us to the final and maybe the most important question of all. If every economic system is really just trying to balance the value of individual freedom against the value of collective equality, where do you draw the line? What does the perfect balance look like to you?